Interview to Chris Moneymaker, take one.
This could be the last card of the 2003 World Series of Poker.
It's a 5.
With a full house, Chris Moneymaker eliminates Sam Farha.
I liked being in casinos. I grew up in a gambling atmosphere. My dad always played blackjack, and I just always enjoyed being in casinos. The problem is I'm not very good at all the other games. I would go to the casino and I would leave broke just about every time playing blackjack or roulette or all the other carnival games that they have there. And so one day I'm at the casino and I see a bunch of 80-year-old men sitting around a table, and I'm like, what in the world? What's going on over there? Poker back then wasn't a thing. It was very, very hit or miss. You couldn't find games. Really, the only games that were Vegas, Atlantic City, and then we had a little small poker room in Tunica, Mississippi is where I was. And so I went over there and asked them what they're playing. They said Texas Hold'em. I'm like, what the hell's that? So I didn't play that day, but I went back. Me and my friends were playing. We would play Chase the Queen, Midnight Baseball, AC/DC, all these type of wild card games. It was always dealer's choice. Well, we had a buddy that actually went down to Tunica, and he found Texas Hold'em. Well, he would always pick Texas Hold'em when it was his turn, and so when you're playing like AC/DC, Midnight Baseball, these are all like match the pot games. So pots are getting to 200, 400, 600, which back then were just massive, were fun. Well, the other thing that didn't happen back then is there was no such thing as no limit Texas Hold'em. Everything was limit. So he brought Texas Hold'em to the game that we were playing, and every time he picked it, we all complained because it's $1, $2. So we all just folded real fast. He picked up $3 and we moved on. We hated the game. It was terrible. The people that play poker today don't understand how good they have it when it comes to today's game. If you walked over to the wall at the Horseshoe in Tunica back then, there was a plaque on the wall and it said, checking and raising is not allowed. You couldn't check raise. So like, if you had a hand, you had to bet, or you were just never gonna get money in the pot. So the game was very straightforward. Like if you had a hand, you bet. If you didn't, you checked. And that's pretty much what all these old guys did. So I quickly figured out, well, hell, if they checked to me, I just bet every time. And I just started printing money. Sadly, it was that easy. Now, online poker back then was not a thing. It was very, very small. Not many people knew about it. There were very few sites. And the biggest game they had back then was like 5-10 limit. It's not what you see today. It's not, when you log on to Americas Cardroom and you see just hundreds of tournaments going off all day long. I guess when it was virtual money and people just didn't care, you could check raise online. So, but people still weren't doing it. I mean, because most rooms you couldn't check raise. So I actually won the World Series of Poker a lot by just playing in position because people weren't check raising very much. And I just bet whenever they checked to me. And that's what I did for 3 days. It was a super strong strategy. So some of my strongest memories back in 2003 was winning the seat. I was super excited because, I get to go play the World Series of Poker main event. It was not even a bucket list item, it was just kind of a cool thing. But, I'm playing with my friends, and I'm going to Tunica and playing with literally 80-year-old men. Like, I have no business going to Vegas and playing in a, where people can read your soul. At this time, I only knew 3 poker players that alive, and it was Doyle Brunson, Phil Hellmuth, and Johnny Chan. The only reason I knew Johnny Chan was from the movie Rounders. We watched the movie Rounders, so I knew a little bit about No Limit Texas Hold'em. When I was going to go win my seat, 4th place got $8,000 in cash, and I had about $8,000 in credit card debt. So my buddy's like, "Listen, I will take your seat, half your seat, and give you $5,000, and we'll go 50-50." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good deal." Well, it just so happens we decided to go to Tunica that next weekend, and the $5,000 he was going to give me for half my action in the main event, he lost it in Tunica. So I went to my dad and told my dad, and I remember sitting in a restaurant, just sitting in the booth, and I told my dad, I was like, "Hey, do you want to make a really bad investment in your son?" And he's like, well, yeah, what do you need? I said, I'm looking to sell $4,000 worth of my, main event buy-in. So, give me 4,000, or he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2. It's like, booked. I'll take 2. I went to another good friend of mine and sold the other 2. So I sold 40% of myself for the main event. So I ended up having 60%, which is actually a lot more than I wanted. I was actually trying to actively sell more, but people didn't understand it. Like I'm trying to sell something to people. It's like, they're looking at me like, you're crazy. The only reason I sold 40% is, one, it was my dad, and another was a good friend of mine. They had no idea what they were buying. And my friend that lost the 5K, obviously he's kind of upset, but not really that upset, because I'm going to be coming home that day. So anyways, we're about a week out of me going out to Vegas, and I remember I was a controller for a restaurant group back then. I walked into the owner's office and I said, hey, listen, going out to Vegas, I might be out there for a week, might be out there for a day, I don't know, but obviously if I do anything special, I'm coming back to work. I'm 27 years old, I'm not gonna be like quitting or anything, so you don't have to worry about me like going anywhere. And we kind of chuckle because, there's no way I'm winning anyways, but whatever. My buddy shows up and brings me these brand new Oakley glasses. He's like, I couldn't give you the $5,000, but here's a gift for me for going out to Vegas and whatever. So he gives me these cool glasses. And so I'm off to Vegas, get ready to go play against all these super pros that can just look into your soul and tell you what your 2 cards are. And I get out there, and I got my best friend who lost the 5K. He went with me, and my dad went with me. We walk into Binions Horseshoe, and I'd never been downtown Vegas before. Walked in, I'm like, wow, this is what's called a unique experience. Out front, they had a big whiteboard that they had dry erase markers. Every player that played the main event, they wrote your name on a dry erase board. This is old school. They're expecting a record-breaking year. They think that they're going to have a massive year. They had 600 players the year before, and they think they're going to try and get 800 players this year. And we ended up getting 839 players, and it was a madhouse in Binions. Like it was really jam-packed. But I remember going to my seat and sitting down for a second, saying a little prayer, and walking back upstairs, and I'm almost hyperventilating. I'm so nervous, and this guy sits next to me, and I don't know why, but he's like, nervous? I'm like, yeah, I'm nervous. I'm about ready to play, a $10,000 buy-in event. My biggest one I've ever played is a 200, and I was super nervous in the 200. The other thing that they have when you're playing your WSOP, and I had won my seat online, is they brand you. They put the website on your chest. Well, unlike today, where I'll sit here and I'll wear Americas Cardroom, everybody knows, you're an online player, everybody's great online, everybody plays online. Back then, if you were wearing this, it was like basically you're a second-class citizen. Like, they're playing poker, you're playing checkers, chess and checkers. It's just completely different. They don't consider an online player a poker player. So I'm super nervous. This guy gives me this like super crystal or whatever, and it didn't mean anything to me at the time, but I was like, that's pretty cool. And I kept it with me for 7 days for whatever reason. And he was a super nice guy, and he's like, this is gonna make you win the main event. I'm like, sure, man, whatever. And I was gonna try to make it through day 1 without even playing a hand. I was only going to play the nuts. I was only going to play in position. And if it was not raised, that's the only time I was going to play unless I had aces, and then I was just going to like move all in. That was my strategy going in. I had no clue what to expect. And my table is like, it's got 2 other people that have online insignias on their chest. And then there's just a bunch of old guys that don't seem like they're really that good. So I'm like, okay, I can play here. And everything's going fine for like the first 2 hours. And then finally I lose 1 hand to a guy, and they're like, nice hand, champ. I'm like, I turn, he's sitting 2 to my right, and I'm like, champ, who the hell is this guy? And I look at his face really good. Then, in Binions, they had a wall of all the pictures of all the main event champions. So I walk over there and look and, try to find, who this guy is. Because back then, world champions were like revered. It was like a different class system. I remember one guy told me back in the day he played with a world champion. I'm like, man, shut up, you've never played with a world champion. So anyways, I go back and I look at the wall, and sure enough, I'm playing with Dan Harrington. He's sitting 2 to my right at my starting table, and I had no idea. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, this guy hasn't even played a hand all day. He's just sitting here. I mean, he hasn't really done anything. I'm being more active than him. He's more afraid than I am. Ignorance is bliss, thank goodness. So that was a scary time. But you know, obviously I made it through the day and got to play on. So, you know, we get down heads up, and first of all, it's like 4 in the morning. So we're like all just dead tired. Like it's just miserable. They don't do what they do now where like they stop playing after a certain time and get breaks. Like we played marathon sessions back then. He's falling asleep at the table. I've got so much adrenaline going on that because I'm just three-handed. I'm a millionaire now and I've got all this money, so I'm just hammering the hell out of both of them. But we get down to heads up and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This is for like massive money. So I said, can we like talk about making a deal or, you know, splitting money up and just playing for the bracelet or whatever? And they're like, yeah, you can't talk here about that. We don't, you know, allow that kind of stuff. And so we walked off to the bathroom and, you know, we get in there and I was like, hey, you know, do you want to like just, I had like almost 2-to-1 chip lead on him at the time. But I'm sitting there like, I could lock up $1.6 million. I said, you know, you just want to chop it up and play for the bracelet. And he's like, I would prefer to put all the money together and play for it. And I thought it was kind of joking, but whatever. I was like, oh, that's pretty funny. Then he goes, you know what? Honestly, like I have an edge. So if you give me, you know, a little bit more, I think I deserve a little bit more based on my skill level. And then we can, you know, talk about chopping it up. I look him dead in the face, and my exact words were, "F you, let's play." And we walked out of the bathroom, and that meeting in the bathroom told me a few things. One, he thinks he's that much better than me, so I know he wants to play small ball. I know he doesn't want to like get in really big pots with me because he wants to use his experience to wear me down. The things I learned about Sammy was, if you're a professional, he would attack you all the time and put lots of pressure on you. He was a crazy guy when it came to professionals, but when it came to amateurs, he always thought that we were just calling stations and we were weak, and so he just didn't really, he always value bet his hands. He really didn't, you know, go on these massive bluffs and do things against amateurs. So I was just going to use that against him. I was going to make the pots as big as possible. And just, I figured at this point, you know, I'm going to just go for it, put just a bunch of pressure on him and make him very uncomfortable. And that was my plan going in. Final heads up, I think it lasted 24 hands. And, you know, we're kind of joking. It's like, yeah, this could be over fast. I'm like, oh, it's going to be.
This could be the last card of the 2003 World Series of Poker.
It's a 5.
With a full house, Chris Moneymaker eliminates Sam Farha.
20 years later, I'm still surviving. It's been a fun ride ever since. But yeah, I don't even know what the question was at this point.
I think that's a wrap, guys.